Good morning.
Hi, Ali.
Hi. Um, so this was a word you kind of threw out when we were chatting last time, decency,
Mhm.
and we started having a little bit of a back and forth about what it means and whether everyone should be decent and what that means. And so we've both done a little bit of research and had some debates with ChatGPT about decency and what it means. And yeah, let's see where we go. So this started out with thinking that the world would be a better place if everyone was a bit more decent towards
Yeah,
each other. Um, and so I don't know. Do you want to start with the definition that then got us on this kind of roundabout?
yeah. Well, um, I, I was thinking about what is it that the world needs, because I mean, pick a country. It seems like everywhere you find that there's, I don't know, all sorts of obnoxious behavior
Yeah.
on different levels. And I thought that, well, what would make it better? And eventually I landed on decency. I thought that we lack decency. But then, as you said, what is decency? How do you define it? What's a proper definition? So, but it's basically comes down to morally upright, respectful, considerate behavior,
Yeah. So this is where
which
I
then,
jumped in and I said, but whose morals? Because everyone has different
correct,
morals. So what does morally upright mean?
yes, and respectful and
Yeah.
considerate, you know.
Yeah.
So, so then you start looking at. I think I asked you in that conversation what synonyms would you use, and you used respect, kindness, empathy, and tolerance,
Yeah.
all as part of or what you would consider as synonyms for decency. And so it becomes a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
I think in that definition that we got, it refers to respect, kindness, empathy, and tolerance as virtues
Mm-hmm.
of decency.
Yeah.
Um, and a virtue is a positive trait or quality of moral excellence.
And we keep
Again, there
getting
we are
back
with
to
moral,
morality. Yeah.
correct. But the second part of that definition of virtues refers to deeply ingrained patterns of behavior in a society or a culture.
Yeah.
So we still don't know exactly what decency is. Well, I think I do by my definition
Well,
of
again, here's the thing: is we can all have slightly different definitions based on our perspective or upbringing or culture or whatever it is. The one word that kept popping up that I didn't really interrogate too much, which I feel an affiliation to, is fairness. But then I suppose again, it's like fair to who? Fair. You can't be fair to everyone.
correct and whose
There's,
definition of
yeah,
fair do you adopt? I
yeah,
think that's kind of like one of the one of the bigger divisive issues that is currently predominantly in the US is when with all this talk about reparations, you know,
yeah,
what is fair um, and who decides?
yeah,
And I suppose we can, take that to a lot of other things
yeah,
around that is kind of, I wouldn't just say politically, but in society, it's
yeah,
playing out about, what is fair.
yeah,
So kindness is another one that, for me, definitely is part of decency, and sure, we can do with a lot more kindness in the world. Um, I was recently listening to a podcast where they talked to Kevin Kelly about his new book, a really good book. I think I've referred to it before.
Yeah.
Just short little aphorisms, kind of things that you can use in a practical way. And one of them, if I remember correctly, said that if you can be right or kind, be kind.
Yeah.
And that's a nice one to remember.
That is nice.
But there's also a point where kindness can be abused.
Yeah. So what do we mean by kind though? Sorry, I'm interrogating every word, but what does being kind mean? Like how are you kind to someone?
By being decent? I don't know.
We're just
This
gonna
is all
keep going
circular.
round and round in
Exactly.
circles. The other one I was thinking about is just being just or be justice, but again it's subjective because justice for one person is not the same as justice for another.
Yeah, definitely. Um, the Because justice, immediately you think of laws,
Yeah,
and you think of the application of the laws,
yeah,
because that's one thing that the world doesn't lack is enough laws,
yeah.
but how they are applied and when they are applied is a different.
Well, then there's also the idea of justice as retribution or justice as rehabilitation, and it's like which which one. Yeah. So again, it just opens a can of worms bringing in that word. So the one thing that I had asked ChatGTP was about is being a decent person the same as being a good person? And obviously it hedged its bets. It said they're similar but not the same.
I would say it's the same,
Yeah.
but that's according to my definition.
Yeah. So don't you think everyone believes themselves to be a good person? Like, I don't imagine that there's any person who thinks that they're a horrible human being or believes that they're a horrible human being. They believe maybe that they do bad things, but it's for a reason. There's a purpose or because of a cause or but I feel like everyone thinks that they're a good person.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So then how do
It's
you tell people to be a good person if they're like, well, I am?
Yes, because they will justify their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's where we come back to the thing about ingrained patterns of behavior in society.
Yeah.
So, what I was thinking about this, I was thinking, well, you know what? It all comes back to the parents.
That Philip Larkin poem.
Yes, well, I didn't even think of the Philip Larkin poem, but no, no. So if we say that being moral and upright and respectful and considerate and kind and empathetic, these are the things that make us decent. Well, where do you learn all of those things? Or who are you supposed to learn those from? From a school? No. From a church? No. From a government? Definitely not. From an employer? No. So who's left? It's the parents.
Yeah.
But if I look at what I consider to be the lack of decency out there in the world, then wow, there's a generation or two of parents who has a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
And it worries me that if we continue on this trajectory, where's the world going to end? It's, it's just constantly, there's just more of us and them,
Yeah.
you know.
Hasn't there always been, though? This is always my thing, is when you look back in history, there's always us and them. There's never been this world peace that every beauty pageant contestant wishes for. I mean, there's always been people fighting each other.
You know what? I never thought of that, but if only we had a world government and the Miss Worlds and the Miss Universes of the last 10 years were in charge, we would have had world
World
peace.
peace, exactly. Well, a lot of people say there's a big argument for women being in positions of power in terms of public.
Yeah, except, except then you have New Zealand during COVID, you have Liz Truss in the UK, you have Hillary Clinton,
Mm.
you have Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland,
Mm-hmm.
you have Angela Merkel in Germany. She did
I
okay.
was going to say, what are you saying badly about Angela Merkel? I thought she was a good world leader.
Yeah, I think some of the chickens are coming home to roost. I think the, I
Well,
think we could,
world
if
leaders in general, we could probably say something nasty about every
true,
single one.
true. I think we're going to have to go back all the way to Margaret Thatcher to get. No,
Iron Lady.
I am, I am all for that, for more women to be in, simple basic qualifications in terms of are you equipped to do the job. But other than that, you're 100% correct in your statement that we've never had world peace, or there's always been the us and them.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there was a period when it was a hell of a lot more civilized
Because there was no
than it.
social media and spread of information. So it all comes down to technology, actually.
I don't know if we can blame technology for that.
The users.
I think we,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's, look, it is, I think, an increasing problem.
Yeah.
It obviously, technology makes us a hell of a lot more aware of it than we used to be. It used to be that news um, news required a few days or a few weeks to kind of reach the other end of the world, whereas now it's instantaneous.
Yeah.
But even I try to make these comparisons between, the late 60s or the 70s, when there was a lot of, I don't know, discontent
Yeah.
about certain things and so on. And maybe it is, being so far removed from it, but we look back at it now and say, well, that was pretty peaceful. I don't know if we kind of lived through it, if it would have been a I don't know if I would have experienced it as more severe or causing a lot more turmoil in society, etc.
Yeah. I do think that the social media lifestyle world, the access to information and to people and groups that think similarly to you, allows for this group think where you know that you have an army behind you, so you can almost say whatever you want, and there are people who will support your statement. So
Correct. Then there's also certain social media channels that, in order for you to do well, you are expected to behave in a certain way.
yeah.
In other words, just on Twitter, if you don't pick a fight with anybody, then what are you doing there? Sort of,
No one will see your
And
tweets.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I suppose one can say for, um, each of the different social media um, channels, one can kind of create this persona, or what does well.
Mm.
But I see that kind of bleeding onto the other channels as well. Um, there's a there's a libertarian thinker who says that you can reduce it all down to make one law, and that is, do as thou wilt, but accept the consequences. And I'm sure that it's oversimplified in that you would need a few more laws,
Mm.
but the lack of consequences for people's behavior,
Yeah.
in my opinion, contributes to what I then perceive as a lack of decency.
Yeah. I like that. And it reminds me of that passage I sent to you from Bob Iger's thing, where it just popped up when we were talking about decency. I got to the end of the book. Be decent to people. He does say treat everyone with fairness and empathy, which we can argue, but he also says this doesn't mean that you lower your expectations or convey the message that mistakes don't matter. It means that you create an environment where people know you'll hear them out, that you're emotionally consistent and fair minded, and that they'll be given second chances for honest mistakes. So I quite like his version of decency, where it's like be good to
Yes,
people, but also don't allow them to get away with everything or anything. It's still hold people accountable for their actions, allow them to make mistakes and have a second chance, but it's about still calling out bad behavior and not just accepting everything.
correct, correct. And again, I'm going back to my earlier point about, it is the responsibility of parents to, um, I don't know, to set you on the correct path.
Yeah,
You know, then obviously when you become an adult, to hopefully think for yourself and make your own decisions, um, and be comfortable to disagree with what you were taught in, I don't know, whether it is politics or religion or whatever, um, but maintain the decency and the respect and the empathy.
yeah,
The, you know, as you just quoted there in terms of Bob Iger's views on this, and I suppose one has to see that in a context of in the business world,
yeah,
and as a leader of a huge organization, um, to give people a second chance. You
yeah,
know, I think what is not said there is well, what are those conditions under which you will give somebody a second chance?
yeah,
If somebody came to you and said, "Listen, I made a mistake," could be a small mistake, could be a big mistake, but you can have that conversation and say, "Well, it wasn't intentional. I understand why I went wrong, etc." Then you would give. But if somebody doesn't own up to it, or goes, "Well, screw you,"
yeah,
then you can't expect to be given a second chance. And that doesn't have to do with the lack of decency or no empathy.
yeah. I think consequences for actions maybe is part of decency about being a decent human. You have to understand that there are consequences for the things you say and the things you do. That's part of humanity. Otherwise, we would all be running amok and doing whatever the hell we wanted.
But don't you think that is why we end up with all these new laws created
Yeah.
constantly?
Well, this. Oh,
People
yeah.
people are quick to say, "Well, it's not against the law."
Yeah.
I can be really horrible towards another human being without breaking the law.
Yeah.
So when we talk about these consequences, how does it actually manifest? How do you, because if somebody is really rude and obnoxious, um, I saw a video of just yesterday of a group of teenagers. I forget which town and which city, um, but a group of teenagers just walked into a restaurant and started trashing the place, properly trashing the place. And then they walked out again.
Mm.
Um, so that kind of behavior, how does one combat that? How do I say, well, you know what, you have crossed the line. This is not acceptable because by nobody's moral or ethical code should that be acceptable.
Yeah.
But what do you do as an individual, or even if all the all the employees in that restaurant, that makes it very hard and very tough. To how does one um, eradicate that
Yeah.
kind of behavior? And that's just one example of, for me, that's a lack of decency.
Yeah.
I mean, there
Feels.
was obviously no
Yeah.
tolerance and no respect and no kindness and
Yeah.
no all of these other things and so on, which, um, anyway,
I mean, it feels like an impossible thing to ask for people to just be a little bit more decent. But that is kind of what our suggestion is, that the world would be a better place if everyone acted more decently towards one another.
yeah, and I think, you made the point earlier where you said that if you ask any individual if they think they are a decent person, I'm sure we would get a 10 out of 10, 100%. Yes, I'm a decent person.
Yeah.
And yet, we see behavior around us which I don't think it's just me thinking certain things are not decent behavior.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you look at hardened criminals, if you ask them the question, do they also believe that they are decent people? But so thinking of people maybe who are in gangs,
Yeah.
you know, it's also a worldwide phenomenon. Gangs, all of those guys operate by a strict code of conduct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are very, very specific rules that govern those organizations. And so I wonder if you talk to one of those guys, if they would say that they are decent people, but that the code of conduct that they subscribe to, or the rules that govern them, necessitate them to not do decent things to people. I don't know. It's complicated
Yeah.
because the moment that we start talking about morality, that could be a very long conversation to get to what is morality, what is respect, and what is respectful, and who deserves respect.
Yeah.
It's complicated, but I wish the world would be a little bit more decent.
I mean, we can wish, and we can hope, and we can try and lead by example. And I mean, I don't know what else anyone can do. But yeah, hopefully by listening to this, you think about your interactions with other people and where you can be a little bit more decent to the world.
I hope so.
Well, thank you. I feel like there's no conclusion, but this has been an interesting
They,
chat and something to think about.
yeah, agreed. Thanks.
Thank you.